Hi, my name is Carla, and I wanted to do this video for a while to explain some of the symptoms that I experienced and some of the clues that I was having, and to where I was first diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis in 2016. We moved here to Conroe in 2010 and just working, and by October or November, I came down with pneumonia, and pretty bad. So I was in the hospital for about a week, recovered from that, and I have been smoking since I was 15 years old, and you'd think that would be a clue for me to stop, but no. I would stop and start, stop and start. Some of these people that are watching that have smoked know the process. And so just went out living, and got another, came down later on, maybe a year to 2 years later, came down with some bronchitis, really bad cough, went and got x-ray, got CTs done, and they said I had a nodule on my lungs, but it was nothing to be worried about. And I'm like, okay, well, that shouldn't be on my lungs. So once again, I quit smoking and so forth. And then I started up again, and I got a job as a hotshot driver, which is basically we are taking tools and pipes out to oil rigs and different companies. And that was very strenuous exercise, having to strap down loads onto a flatbed, and yay, go girl power. And so did that for a while, and you know, I was still having a hard time breathing and just couldn't seem to catch my breath. Still smoking. Before I went to doing hotshot, I had worked at this one plant where there was a lot of fiberglass and everything like that. And that's when I came down with the bronchitis, and they were telling me, you need to be on oxygen. You need to be on oxygen. So I got on oxygen for a while, but felt better, so I discontinued it. And but I kept this little thing with me since then. This detects your oxygen level in your blood. And so carry on. We're back doing work, and as a hotshot driver. In March of 2016, my mom was put in a home for dementia, and so I went up to Colorado to visit her. And as I was there, so Colorado is at a higher elevation than Texas, and I was just having a hard time breathing. I could not get my O2 levels above 60. And so my stepdad finally took me to the hospital. When I got there, my O2 was in the 60s. And so they were going to admit me. And at this time, did they give me oxygen? No. They didn't give me any oxygen at all. So they took me to a room, an examining room, and they wanted me to change into a gown. And my O2 dropped tremendously, maybe I think it was in the 50s. And they finally got some O2 on me, and started improving, but they did take some more x-rays, and that's when I was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, and they're pretty much saying sorry. And I didn't understand it then, what they were really saying sorry about. But they said, you know, also it was elevation sickness and everything like that. So I went back to Texas with about 6 oxygen bottles in my car. And once I got back to Texas, you know, I had to go on to temporary disability, or not disability, but short-term disability through my job. But I was no longer able to work there because any type of exertion just wiped me out. I had to be on oxygen. At first, I was only on oxygen just for exertion and stuff like that. And at home, I was fine. you know. So back starting the school year again, this is still 2016, I went back to work as a school bus driver, and I parked as close as I could to the school bus so that I wouldn't have to walk very far. And even walking very far, it just really just knocked me out. I didn't bring my oxygen with me. I didn't even think to ask. I was afraid if I did that they wouldn't let me drive the bus or I would be fired. So in December, during school break, I went and had a bronchoscopy, and I thought they were going to flush my lungs, but really he was just trying to take a biopsy. And it found out that I had pneumonia again. During the recovery after the bronchoscopy, in the recovery room, they couldn't get my stats above 80 because I was laying down. And so I finally got discharged that day, went home. A week later, which turned out to be Christmas night, I got admitted in the hospital for pneumonia again. And at this point, I'm on oxygen 24/7, only about 2 to 3 liters on the thing, and just kind of scary because once I started reading up everything about pulmonary fibrosis, they give you 3 to 5 years to live, and which really scared me. The doctors that I have were, they were okay. You know, some did more tests than the other doctors, and but that's about it. You know, so in January, after I got out of the hospital, and I told my doctor, and he asked me if I wanted to get a lung biopsy to find out if I really had pulmonary fibrosis or what was the cause of it. And so I said yes, and ended up, when they went to go do the biopsy, they was just going to do it through a tube or however they do it, but they had to do an open lung biopsy, which is basically putting he had to cut me open. We got a really nasty scar on my back, and he had to remove part of my rib to get to a good sample and to do the biopsy. And so I was in the hospital. It was only supposed to be in about 3 days. But during the time that I was getting discharged, and she was taking the IV out of my neck, and I don't know if I got an air embolism or what, but I just remembered it started hurting. It started to hurt, and I couldn't seem to catch my breath, and I started hyperventilating, and next thing I know, there's like 20 people around me. They were moving the bed up and down for what, I don't know. So I don't know if it was an air embolism or what, or if I just had a really bad panic attack, because I kept hearing the nurses saying that that's what I was having. And I've never, ever had a panic attack or anxiety attack. And during that time, I thought I was going to die. I really did. I wasn't looking for the light or anything like that. I just was like, okay, this is my time to die. This is my time to die. And so, but God. And, you know, during this whole time, I was being told, you know, by God, by the Holy Spirit, believe what you want. This is what I believe. That I had a testimony, and I couldn't have a testimony if I was dead. So once I heard that again, you know, I came back or whatever. So another 2 days in the hospital. And so by this time, I was just, like I said, still on oxygen 24/7. Instead of 2 to 3 liters on the oxygen dial, I was at 5. I was at the top on the concentrator at home. And February, March, at the end of March, towards the end of March, this is 2017 now. So at the end of March, I remember getting up and just felt like I couldn't breathe, and went to turn up my oxygen concentrator as high as it would go, and it did, and I couldn't get my O2 levels above 70s. And so instead of calling out for my husband or even walking back to the room to get my husband, I texted him. And so we went to the hospital and Memorial Hermann, and they could never tell me, they never really gave me an official diagnosis when I was there. I was there for about a week, and they finally kept telling me, you need a transplant, you need a transplant. And I'm like, okay. So we'll do have pneumonia again. And they just never really gave me a full diagnosis. So, and this was in the Woodlands, so they transferred me down by ambulance to Memorial Hermann in Houston. And I was there for one night and found out that that I was out of network with my insurance. So they drove me 1 mile in an ambulance to St. Luke's Hospital in Houston, and which the ambulance cost over like $1,500 just to go 1 mile. So insurance covered most of that. Not all of it, but most of it. So I get to St. Luke's. It's the weekend, I believe, and they did some CTs and just kind of kept me comfortable. Now they got me on a high flow oxygen, and the tube is probably about that thick, and it's like warm or whatever. I don't know how they did it, but anyways, so I was at 10, the highest that we could go on the high flow oxygen. Come to find out, I was right there on the verge of being too sick to have a transplant. And so they did all the tests to make sure that I could handle the transplant and to see if I would be eligible for a transplant. And they said a double lung transplant is what I need. I'm like, okay. It was getting harder and harder to eat, harder just to do anything, even lying in bed. It was just getting harder and harder to breathe. And it finally came down to, they asked me, I believe they asked me, do I want to get on ECMO? And they explained a little bit about it to me, and pretty much it's life support. This was after I got approved to be on the transplant list. And so I was on ECMO for maybe 3 or 4 days. I was in and out of consciousness, and I had a really good nurse who's moved on to a different hospital. Her name is Lauren. Thank you. If you ever see this or whatever, thank you. You really helped. And so one morning she woke me up and she said, we got lungs for you. And I'm like, okay. So I went back to sleep. So at this time I was at the top of the list. And they did a double lung transplant on me. I think the surgery lasted about 8 hours or so, from what my family tells me. And I remember afterwards just being in and out of consciousness, and I was told that they couldn't close me up, so they kind of kept me in a coma for a week because they couldn't stop the bleeding or something like that after the transplant. So I have a big nasty scar. It's faded pretty much by now, but they had to keep my hands tied on the side rails so that I wouldn't touch my chest or whatever, and which I wasn't going to because I was pretty much on some really good drugs. And so of course I'm in ICU. My family could only visit me for a little bit. It was really scary. Really scary. I had a lot of hallucinations, not only visible while I was awake, but my dreams were really, really weird. Just weird. But as I got moved to an upper floor, some of the nurses were good and some were not. I had one respiratory therapist. She was evil. She was an evil person, and she was just an evil person. So at this time, I can't move my arms or my legs. I have no strength whatsoever. So it's really inconvenient to be that way, because especially after having a double lung transplant, you can't. And the doctors keep telling me the reason why is because I was so sick and because I was under such so long under anesthesia. And also after the transplant, my left lung just had constant pneumonia, and so they were constantly going in and out, trying to clear it up and trying to, you know. So my double lung transplant was on April 10th, 2017. And there's so many different stories to tell after my transplant, and some of the different obstacles I had to face just in the hospital. While I was in the hospital, you know, I had to learn how to use my legs and my arms again. I had to build the strength up again. And they moved me to a different hospital, to a Kindred hospital. And I felt like I was going to the stepchild of hospitals when I went there. And they didn't prove me wrong. Needless to say, I got rashes on my bottom because they didn't change me quick enough, because I was not able to go to the bathroom by myself. You know, I couldn't. They're the ones, the physical therapists there are godsends. They were the ones that got me up. They got me walking, you know, to the point where I could wipe my own butt afterwards. And that might be TMI, but oh well, it's the part of the transplant. And also during that time, if you may notice, they had to put me on a trach, because apparently after the transplant, I wasn't able to get enough air in my lungs. So not only could I not move my arms or my legs, I couldn't talk, and I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink water for the longest time. Well, I couldn't drink water or eat anything until they took the trach off. So I had to learn how to breathe with this tube down my throat. And sometimes I still get really bad anxieties about that, because whenever they would have to move me to clean me, and it was scary, and I'd panic and I'd flame my arms and stuff. And you know, it's like, some of the nurses were really good, and they learned how to be gentle when turning me because of that. And that was so hard to learn how to breathe with the tube down your throat, and then have to learn how to breathe again without it. And so But once I was able to do that and get back walking, they moved me back to St. Luke's to do some more physical therapy and to get better, you know. And so at this time, that's what I did. Walk the halls, and they would have little exercises to use my hands, to get grip with my handbag, and I can't remember, excuse me, the date that I got discharged. I think it was June or July. No, it was, I know it was after June. No, it had to have been July. Let's see, because in June was our anniversary, so we spent our anniversary in the hospital. So yeah, that wasn't fun. So that's the basic story, but like I said, there's still so many different stories that I experienced for my transplant and after my transplant. It's coming up on 3 years now of my double lung transplant, and I'm pretty healthy. Well, in 2018, found out after they did a whatever, they found I had colon cancer, and it was stage 0. Yay! So they had to have surgery on that to remove it. And also, that whole year after my transplant, I was on a feeding tube, and I had to do feedings at night because I wasn't gaining any weight whatsoever, and it should have been a clue to everybody, because I was always having to go get shots to up my white cell count or whatever. And my lowest weight, so before the transplant, I was weighing about 175-ish. After the transplant, after I got home, I got down to about 95. So I lost a lot of weight, and it wasn't pretty. Even though I thought it was like, yay, you know, I didn't have to wear a bra, could wear a tank top, you know. I know guys probably don't care about this, but as girls, yes. But it was painful because I was just skin and bones. So anytime I would sit anywhere, I was just sitting on my bones. And so they kept me on a feeding tube for a year. And after they removed the cancer out of my colon, I started eating, and of course you can see now I started eating. And then about a few months later, I got the tube taken out, and then the following year, I got skin cancer, or they diagnosed me with skin cancer, and there's a little bit of scar there. That was also stage 0. So I'm really happy about that. You know, but that's it. That's as far as all the sickness afterwards. Nothing else has happened. My lungs are fine. You know, they're perfectly fine. I've met the donor's mother, and she's a very sweet lady and everything. And also another thing, at the time of my lung transplant, I was at 10% lung function. And right now, I don't know what my lung function is, but I know it's above almost 80, so, which is good for me. That might be my new normal, and that's okay with me. And so that's pretty much my story. If you have any questions, like I said, I don't remember everything. And when I do, I have to write it down to say, like, did that really happen? You know, because like I said, I had a lot of vivid hallucinations, and they weren't scary because I knew what was happening, but some of the dreams were really vivid, and they were kind of made me really, really sad. And, you know, and now when I see videos of these people that get their transplants and they just shot up and start breathing again and they're okay, and it's like, sometimes I get jealous, you know. But like I said, thank you for watching, and I hope you made it all the way through. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. And hopefully I can figure out how to upload this thing and do it right. And once again, my name is Carla. God is good all the time. All the time. He's faithful. He never failed me. He never left me. He stood, you know, he was there. And some people call me a walking miracle because I was on the transplant list for 6 days. 6 days. That's a miracle in itself, just to be on a transplant that short of time. So I'm very, very, very grateful to my donor. His name is Ernie, and he was about 41 years old. And that's all the information I want to give about him, because from the donor's mother, she was a very private person, and so that is what I will do. I don't know, I might figure out how to delete his name or bleep his name out. So anyways, like I said, thank you for watching, and I hope that this blesses you somehow. I hope this encourages you somehow to not give up, and God is in control. God is in control. So thank you. Bye.